happens if a life insurance claim is disallowed. Obviously, a family typically has lost a loved one, and then it turns out the life company doesn't want to pay out on the coverage. We're joined by Nainesh Kotak, founder of Kotak Personal Injury Law. Thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I mean, we don't really have figures in Canada,
right.
but in the US, we have an idea of how often this occurs.
Right, they do keep stats in the US. We're looking at about 3 to 4% of applications for life insurance policy payouts are denied. I suspect we have a similar stat in Canada. And it may not seem like a lot, but think about it. Most families, in fact, have, there's a life insurance policy for the primary breadwinner. Mm-hmm. So even at that 3 to 4%, it is significant in terms of quantum, and it can be a very significant blow to the family if a claim is denied.
And of course, life insurance is important. It's typically not taxed, a payout, and it doesn't have to go through probate, I don't think.
That's right. It's one of the greatest vehicles that estate planning is a various form of life insurance, term or whole life or universal, for sure.
Typically, what are the reasons a life company will cite?
Right. So the main one is misrepresentation, but there also is lapsing of a policy. Someone might have a term life and didn't realize it lapsed. That does happen. Mm-hmm. There is also, if you're involved in hazardous activities, and you pass away due to that, that might be an exclusion under your policy. Mm-hmm. There's suicide. If it generally most policies will deny that if it's within the first 2 years. Mm-hmm. So the biggie, though, the most contentious one is misrepresentation. Mm-hmm. And what do I mean by that? I'm talking about misrepresentation in the application process itself. So our Insurance Act, it's Section 183 and 184 in Ontario, they require being candid in your application, disclosing all material facts. Mm-hmm. Material facts would be something that would result potentially in denial of a claim or an increase of premium. Mm-hmm. So misrepresentation is treated in two ways, depending on the time of the existence of the policy. If the policy's existed for 2 years, not 2 years, sorry, but before 2 years, and you pass away in that time, your beneficiaries make an application, the insurer will ask for medical records. If it turns out there was a misstatement or misrepresentation of a medical condition in one of the answers to the questions, even if it's not related to the condition that led to the death, it becomes voidable if it's material. Material meaning, again, would they have issued the policy or would they have charged a higher premium? Mm. So, but beyond that, now, after 2 years, we have what's called incontestability. And it's kind of a misnomer. It doesn't mean that they cannot say no to it, but the insurer has to establish that there was a fraudulent misrepresentation in the application itself. Now, it's not necessarily in the criminal context of fraud. It is obviously deliberately intending to deceive, but also there's an element of a reckless disregard for the truth. So those are the ones that are heavily fought, and the burden is on the insurer to show that there was a fraudulent misrepresentation. And we probably get about 4 to 5 cases of these a year ourselves, and we're pretty successful with them. But I can tell you, it's very traumatic for the family. Yeah. The beneficiaries, obviously, they're looking for a payout, and it's quite problematic. I've got a couple, some tips in terms of when you apply for insurance, because that's the key point. Mm-hmm. Look, just be honest. If you're a smoker, tell them you smoke. Mm-hmm. If you're taking medication for something, if you have an upcoming test, if you've had something, because the questions are so broad. Yeah. Clarify those questions and answer them correctly. Sometimes, and this is what you've got. Often we buy policies from insurance brokers, and it's very valuable because the broker can canvass different insurance companies to get you the appropriate policy. Mm-hmm. At the same time, the broker wants to sell the policy. Mm. And they're the ones who often read those questionnaires too, the medical questionnaire. So make sure the broker takes their time with you and goes through it very slowly and records your answers correctly. Because we've had claims where we've got some ongoing now. We've had to sue brokers as well because our beneficiary said, look, my dad or what have you didn't speak very good English. They relied on the broker and said, sign here, sign here. So you get a dispute potentially for negligence on behalf of the broker as well. So it can get in a mess.
Sorry, you have to remember the broker is in part a salesperson.
Exactly. They have obviously they're knowledgeable. Mm-hmm. They serve that purpose of shopping around. But they're making good money. They're making a great commission. So their incentive is to get you the policy issued. Mm-hmm. Right?
Do you find that the life insurance company will, presumably they want to settle out of court?
Yes.
Nobody wants to go to court.
Yes. Yeah, I find, we had one probably about 3 to 4 months ago, and I won't name the insurer, got them to pay the whole thing because it was, it's one where they allege fraud, and 5 to 6 years later after the application, that person dies of a different reason. And we look at the medical records, and there clearly wouldn't have been. It was a person who may have had psychological issues but wasn't reported. So, we were able to establish very clearly, yes, there might have been a misstatement, but there's no fraud. And we got them to pay out in full. The thing about life insurance policy, it's an all or nothing. If you go to court, a judge or a jury is going to say it's a zero or it's the entire amount.
Oh, they won't award...
No, they won't be a partial. But when you negotiate on that more, a 50-50 case, those tend to be bargained and discounted. But on a lot of the strong cases, we just take the position that just you pay it or you're going to be paying damages in court as well.
That's interesting, though, that kind of 2-year deadline. The onus of proof on the life insurance company becomes tougher. It
becomes tougher for them, and understandably so. You've paid premiums for those 2 years. So our legislation encoded really what was around in common law, and that is, was there a fraudulent misrepresentation? And they call that the incontestability period. It still is contestable, but it's a much difficult onus on the insurance company to establish fraud.
Nainesh, that's a fascinating topic. You always bring us great stuff. Thank you very much indeed.
And thank you for having me.
Nainesh Kotak, founder of Kotak Personal Injury Law.